Oh, yes. Hello, 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 my dear friends. It's time to talk about why I love getting men laid. Do you love getting men laid, Robert?
You know what, Joshua? Turns out that I do.
That's weird. You're weird.
There's actually a lot of reasons that I love getting men laid. And I was thinking maybe we could go live here and talk about it a little bit.
Let's talk about it a little bit because
Talk
it's
about it.
it's so worth talking about, And actually, one of the things that I just want to like surface right from the start is how a lot of people who read that title, um, that we're coming from a conditioning, a culture that presumes that getting a guy laid is a take from women somehow. So I want you, the people, if you're watching this, if you're listening to this, I want you to ask yourself if there's any assumption in there for you, any like either lurking thing in the background or like blaring thing that says getting a guy laid is a take, is um, somehow wrong.
Yeah,
Right?
like at the expense of women.
Yeah, at the expense. Thank you. I was looking
Yeah,
for that language.
yeah.
And I had a guy that we worked with. He came through our Authentic Dating Secrets program, and he was raised in a deeply religious background. And we get a lot of guys like that in our program, especially in the dating and relating program, because they have been so like their conditioning is such the like apotheosis of shaming sexuality, right? They grew up just feeling totally ashamed of their sex and totally like it's not okay. And they could have so many things going for them, but on some deep internal level, they constantly um, they constantly sabotage their own love life because they feel like it's wrong, it's dirty, right? And that it's a take, that it's taking from God, that it's taking from women, that it's predatory, that it's in a bad way, right?
Yeah.
And it was one of the most beautiful things, one of the most beautiful things to see this guy who, such a beautiful man, such a good heart, such a smart, intelligent, good looking guy. God, he put so much energy and time into becoming an exquisite lover through all kinds of tantra workshops and things like that. Um, Actually start to integrate that he could have what he wanted and it could be a total win-win. And he started having relationships with women, being totally honest about what he was up for and what he wanted, and having these outrageous win-wins that most men would just like be jealous of getting to have with multiple women, because that was his desire, was to be in a space of open relating and to be engaging with multiple women and engaging different fantasies and different flavors of connection with different women. And I just like, it was such an uncaging of his authenticity and his truth. And so many women got to experience a man being present with them in a way that they had rarely ever experienced a man being present. Um, and it was just such a beautiful win-win situation.
And the word uncaging is so perfect to me because certainly the guys that we work with have tended to be very caged in. There's a lot of messaging about male sexuality, about masculinity in general, that it's somehow harmful or dangerous or creepy, or even a guy having desire is creepy. There's all these messages that are that men are just bombarded with. And, you know, I'm not confused about why they're there. There's been a lot of harm done by men.
Yeah.
And the deeper conversation, Joshua and I were talking before this, we hit the record button for this video about why do we do this work? Why do we love helping men come into fuller ownership of their sexuality? Why do we love getting men laid, helping men get laid? And it is this piece around this messaging that men get that our sexuality, our masculinity, is somehow inherently bad or harmful. And here's the thing: it's such a strong, compelling narrative. Certainly in our circles, our more progressive circles, the thing is that it's actually playing right back into the thing we're trying to undo, because when we cage men in, when we shame them, when we suppress them, when we tell them that they're harmful, when we tell them that their sexual desire is somehow not good or not right, let alone healing and beautiful and nourishing and needed in the world, then men live these small lives where they've stuffed all these different parts of themselves far away, deep in the shadows, and kind of one of two things end up happening, and sometimes both of them at different moments in time. These guys either become floppy, spineless men who don't make an impact in the world. They just stand by passively while things are happening around them. It might be in their own relationship and it might be in the world around them. And they don't know how to create effective change. They're guys with good hearts, but they don't know how to show up potently and fiercely. And then the other thing that sometimes happens is that it all gets so bottled up that it comes out and explodes, or it comes out passive aggressively jabbing and cutting. And a world where men aren't able to take a stand for what they believe in and make positive, impactful change, a world where men are blowing up and exploding unexpectedly, or where they're acting passive aggressively and manipulating from underneath the covers, underneath the surface. That's not the kind of world that I want to live in. And so a world where we're helping men become uncaged in this way that Joshua is talking about has everything to do with male sexuality, has everything to do with men really getting on a fundamental level that they are good, and that their sex is good, and that their desire is good, and that it can be brought to the world in a way that, like Joshua says, is a complete win-win for everybody involved, and create a positive feedback loop that heals and opens more people, rather than a negative feedback loop that just shames more people and passes on trauma and passes on closure and shame and so on and so forth.
Yeah. Yeah. And it just rubs up against so many different narratives here. I had the pleasure of doing a VIP immersion with a couple that I've been working with for a while now. And one of the things that I had this couple do was wrestle. I got them, we laid out some mattresses and created a safe space. And I set up the rules, no striking unless it's a spank on the butt, no biting unless it's a bite on the butt, are two of my favorite rules for setting up a wrestling match between a couple. And it was such a beautiful microcosm of things that want desperately to happen between men and women. And in this relationship in particular, where there's a lot of criticism coming from her towards him. And there's a lot of neediness coming from him towards her. And he appears very weak in a lot of ways in the relationship. And what got to happen was that they got to wrestle. Their animal bodies got to engage with each other at a really potent level. And she got, on some level, what she's been hungry for so long, which is to go against him with all of her might and strength and be totally and utterly dominated, to be pinned to the floor by this man who she's been emotionally dominating for so long. And it's this animal level. There's something that is so deeply satisfying at an animal level in that interaction. And what was beautiful, because of the love they have, he was relentless in his utter pinning and domination of her, and so gentle with her in that space, right? And that's the kind of masculinity that we want to cultivate. That's there's a win-win that ironically happens in that dynamic between men and women, when there's a potency, when there's an unapologetic animal potency that men are embodying and women are willing to surrender to and honor, right? And there are so many ways that can go askew and has gone askew. And I understand our collective fear and mistrust around that. One of the reasons that I love doing this work is, we've been doing men's work for a long time, and we've shifted, we've opened up an emphasis on this dating and relating and sexuality piece, because we understand that nowhere is a man's sort of work more available and alive than in his relationships, in his most intimate relationships. And many men are in a state of utter loneliness and utter like dissociation disconnection from intimate relationship because of the way that we are caged from within by our conditioning, by this culture that has literally, through the threat of violence, kept us from feeling and expressing emotion, through the threat of violence, kept us from moving our bodies in sensuous ways and connecting energetically and emotionally with our own sensations and bodies. Sex is the only place we're allowed to be sensual, right? As a man. Think about that for a minute, ladies. And so, guys who've been caged from within, and a culture that also says that they're inept, that they are, that because of this, they are less than, and they're the cause of relationships failing, and they're wrong because of it, and the shaming that goes on towards men because they have a hard time connecting with their emotions and being present emotionally in a conversation, and this really interesting, I'll say this last piece, this really interesting way that we talk about trauma, right? We talk about how trauma expresses itself. And yet men are so associated as the traumatizers. And yet these behaviors of men are so rarely recognized as trauma. The behaviors of men are so rarely honored and recognized as trauma in our nervous systems, right? And so it's so precious and so powerful to find men where they are in the deepest state of longing and are aware of their longing and their sense of lack, which is around intimacy and relationship with women, and meet them right there. Because everything that needs to be baked into a beautiful, successful, potent, on-purpose life is available in that conversation.
Yeah, and really at the core of this conversation is this vision that you and I hold, that I know we have so much in common around, which is a world where we're working together, where men and women are able to work with each other in synergy, where men aren't pointing the finger at women, which is happening a lot, where women aren't pointing the finger at men, which is happening a lot. And to come through these layers of trauma, these layers of conditioning that we've all grown up in, and come together, like collaborate together, create really beautiful relationships together, make beautiful things happen in the world together, have really good sex together.
Exactly. And, obviously the way that we get men laid is not by giving them scripts and teaching them how to manipulate women into sex. Every time I get a man laid, I get a woman laid. And that woman is receiving a quality of presence that she may rarely have ever experienced from a man.
Yeah. And we've gotten that feedback from women explicitly. Yeah.
And this is working together. This is honoring what we all want. This is the end of the blame game and the victim bullshit, and really taking radical responsibility for ourselves and what we are bringing and what we want and what we and our behaviors and our words, and really self-sourcing, starting with a self-sourcing, starting with a deep self-honoring that is the bedrock from which true, intimate, honest, vulnerable, authentic relationships brings.
Yeah. So we would love to hear what came up for you. Go ahead and leave a comment. What did you agree with? What did you disagree with? Did you get pissed off by the title? Do you hate us? Do you love us? What came up for you?
And I want to know, like, do you have an association instantly with a sense of taking or a sense of inequity when we talk about getting guys laid or guys getting laid? I'd love to hear about what your gut response is around that.
So let us know. Thanks for being with us today. Talk to you next week.
Adios, muchachos.